Hello, Frizzle Frontier. So, a reading order of a series is something that I think about a lot and I'm super fascinated by. So, the Vorkosigan Saga is like my playground right now. Because this series doesn't really have an established official reading order. It's got the order that the books were written in, the publication order, and it also has the internal chronology order. But both of those orders have their own problems if you follow them, especially publication order, which breaks up so many important arcs of the series and is honestly probably the worst way to read the books. Here's what the author has to say about the reading order of this series. It was always my intention to write each book as a standalone so that the reader could theoretically jump in anywhere. Yes, with that book that's in your hand right now, don't put it back on the shelf. Well, still somewhat true. As the series developed, it acquired a number of sub-arcs, closely related tales that were richer for each other. And yes, in my recommended reading order, which I'm about to present to you, I do follow all of these sub-arcs that she lists on her blog post, which I'll link in the footnotes if you want to read more about it. So when I was designing my reading order, I wasn't trying to just stick with the internal chronology. I wasn't trying to stick with the order that I read the series in because I read it way out of order, kind of on purpose for fun. I was asking myself every single time, what is going to produce the best reading experience? What book is a reader craving next? What book does a reader need next in order to better build on this thematic foundation that the series is creating? So I'm going to be guiding you through all the books in the series. So first, you should start with the book, The Warrior's Apprentice. The main character of this series and the narrator of most of the books is named Miles Vorkosigan. Miles' story starts with him getting rejected from the military school that he had his heart set on. He wants so badly to be in this military because his culture is very militaristic and that's how you become a hero. But due to physical deformities that he was born with, he doesn't make the cut. And so he journeys off to the wider galaxy in order to have an adventure instead. You know, kind of a pity party, kind of a distraction, kind of trying to impress his girl that he has a crush on. And along the way, you get to discover this character of Miles, who is so endearing and sometimes annoying and just like hyperactive in all the most entertaining ways. The thing about Miles is he's always acquiring sidekicks and minions. He journeys around the galaxy and picks up people and slowly forms a small army. And then a larger army, because every time he tries to solve a problem, he does solve it. And then through that, he creates an even bigger problem. And every time you think he's done, there's a new problem to solve. And that's one of the things that I love about this book is all that fast-paced, frenetic energy of it. So that is The Warrior's Apprentice. So this series has a lot of really bad covers throughout the years. It's gone through many different editions and it seems like every single edition has new cover art and it's usually terrible. And I had so much to say on all of those covers that the video ended up being 45 minutes long. So I've decided that that is available now exclusively to my patrons. But for now, let's get back to the next book on the recommended reading order, which is The Mountains of Mourning. So Miles has just had his big space adventure from the previous book, right? And then we go back to his home planet of Barrayar for this little novella. So the thing you gotta know about Miles is he's kind of a prince on his home planet. And then one of his duties he's given on his vacation home is to go and be an investigator and a judge and maybe an executioner as part of this murder trial. A thing you have to know about Miles' home planet of Barrayar is that it has a really interesting history. Way back when humans are exploring the galaxy, it got settled, but then the wormhole that group of humans got to the planet with collapsed. And the humans are trapped on this isolated planet of Barrayar with no outside world contact for like hundreds of years. This is called the time of isolation. And then just like 2 generations before Miles's time, Barrayar is rediscovered. They find a new wormhole, they get reconnected to all the other humans in the galaxy, but because of this time of isolation, they've become a really deeply, in a lot of ways, conservative planet. They've kind of created these new cultural tics, and in a lot of ways, those are really negative. It creates a society that is severely ableist and sexist, and that's one of the themes that's getting explored through this series. But it also creates some positives about the society. It's a society that also focuses a lot on the importance of family and trust and loyalty. So this novella has Miles wrestling with the culture as both in ways that it pertains to him and ways that it pertains to this murder case, which was motivated by ableism that he's investigating. It's a beautiful novella that won both the Nebula and Hugo Awards, so it's totally worth it. Don't skip this one. Next book on the list you should read is Vor Game. So this book is split into like 2 parts. One is Miles's adventure on his home planet where he's assigned to help out on this remote base, pretty much the equivalent of like middle of nowhere Siberia. Very much troubles there. And then the second part of the book is going out into space and getting involved in an interstellar war, also with the aforementioned army that he accidentally assembled in The Warrior's Apprentice. And these 2 halves of the book might seem kind of unconnected, but the way that they connect in the end is so fun and satisfying, and I loved this book so much. Next, I recommend you read Cetaganda. So remember a few minutes ago, I mentioned that Miles is kind of a prince on his home planet. He is sent out in this book on a diplomatic mission. So the Empress of Cetaganda has died of old age, and for her funeral, they're inviting diplomats from all over the galaxy to come and attend, and Miles is the one sent from Barrayar. And of course, because Miles is Miles, he finds trouble wherever he goes, and he quickly discovers a plot on Cetaganda with all of this other things going on, and he sticks his nose right in it. One of the things that I love most about this book is this is a book where you really get to know also his cousin Ivan, who's one of the ongoing regulars of the series, and I love Ivan as a character. He's the best. Next on the reading order is Ethan of Athos. So this is the first book of the reading order that isn't narrated by Miles. But one of Miles's sidekicks from his galactic adventures is one of the main characters in this book. The reason that I think you should read Ethan of Athos right here is for 2 reasons. One, because it plays off a lot of Cetagandan politics, so it's nice to read it right after you've read Cetaganda. But then also, after Ethan of Athos, we're going to be reading a few other books that feature this side character, Ellie Quinn. The main character is Ethan. Ethan is from a planet named Athos, and Athos does not have any women in it. They just genetically engineer more men, and that's all they do. But now, they're running out of eggs in order to create more men, so they have to send someone out into the wider galaxy to try to get more Avarian cultures. And the person sent is Ethan. So this is his journey, getting introduced to normal culture with women in it? How scandalous! And it's really fun and cute, and he gets an adventure, like I mentioned before, that gets involved in Cetagandan politics along the way. Of all the books in the series, I think this might be my second favorite. I really like it a lot, and I recommend not skipping it. Next on the reading order, you should read Labyrinth. This is a novella. In this story, Miles is a mercenary, and he's going out into the wider galaxy and getting a job. And this job includes retrieving some tissue samples and stuff, and then this quickly gets messy. You might call it labyrinthian with the twists and turns that the story takes. And you definitely have to read it here because I read it after a different book which spoiled apart, but like, you gotta be along for the ride because I think this might be the one that goes the most off the deep end and gets the most wild, and I love it for that. Next we have another novella, The Borders of Infinity. And let me make a note. The name of the novella is The Borders of Infinity. One of the books that collects a bunch of novellas together is called Borders of Infinity. So if it's The Borders of Infinity, you're getting the novella. If it's Borders of Infinity, you're getting a collection of novellas. Good luck! Anyway, so the story, The Borders of Infinity, Miles is again a mercenary at this stage of his life, and he has been tasked with infiltrating this prisoner of war camp. And he gets into this camp and he decides that he can do more than just the original job and quickly extends the assignment to a gargantuan scale. But this story, I think, is one of the most poignant and thematically rich of the series, and oh, it's so good! Next, you should read Brothers in Arms. This is actually where I started the series. And when I started the series, this is where I was like, where's more information about Ellie? But I was fine on everything else. So if you want to start here, it's not the worst place. Or I guess you could also start with Ethan of Athos, then jump into here. I don't know. Now I'm coming up with new reading orders. No, just stick to the list I'm presenting here. It's great. So Miles is still the head of a mercenary fleet in this book. And at the beginning of this book, they have just finished up a successful job, actually the job in the novella Borders of Infinity. It comes right on the heels of that. And they are waiting to get paid. The payment is delayed. And so this plot first begins with Miles trying to track down their money. And then, because Miles is Miles and he's always getting his nose into trouble, he discovers some more trouble. And then the plot escalates to ridiculous and very entertaining lengths from there. And I loved this book. This is what got me started on the series. This is what got me hooked on the series. It's so fun. And next after that, you should read Mirror Dance. One of the things that I love about this series is it's always playing with the ramifications of previous books. And Mirror Dance, I think, is one of the best examples of it. And it's even more impressive because Mirror Dance was written like years and years and years and books later than Brothers in Arms, and yet it's a perfect duo to it. Anyway, so all that goes to say that I cannot really tell you any of the plot of Mirror Dance because it spoils the end of Brother in Arms, but just know, at the end of Brothers in Arms, you will want to pick up Mirror Dance. And yes, it does deal with all the big things that happen at the end of that book, and it deals with them so beautifully. If I was ranking the books in the series, I think I'd put Mirror Dance as my number 3. It's a book that has the entertaining and interesting pace and getting out of controlness of many other books in the series, and it also has really powerful themes of like making your identity through all different plot lines. Now, next you should read Shards of Honor. Shards of Honor is not a book from Miles' perspective. Shards of Honor was actually the book that was written and published first in the series. So you might be asking, Chloe, why are we reading it like number 10? Never fear, I do have an answer for you, my darling. So there are a few books in the series that follow kind of as prequel books to Miles's, his mother, and her adventures. And one of the things that I loved about my experience reading these 2 prequel books from Cordelia was the great irony and interesting plot twists because I had already gotten her story from Miles's perspective. Miles is in the other books like recounting how his mother and father met, and then in this book we get to see that. We get to see their actual adventures and everything that's going on, and oftentimes it's different from the way we were led to believe it was in the first place, and those little intricacies and ironies are like some of the things I treasure most about this book. I genuinely believe that Cordelia's prequels are more enjoyable if you've already gotten some Miles. I also think it's really nice to stick them in the middle here to get like a break for a minute, because Miles's books are so fast-paced, and Cordelia's books are much more medium-paced to slower-paced. She's a much more sedate narrator, so I think it makes a good break. Anyway, Shards of Honor is a story telling the story of when she first met her future husband, Vorkosigan, and they first meet under some very tense relations where their groups of galactic explorers are trying to kill each other and starting wars, and it gets really tense, and it's a little bit of an enemies to lovers romance, and I love it. Next we have Barrayar. So this is after Cordelia and Errol have gotten together, they've been together for a little while, and now it's taking place on the planet of Barrayar. And this is kind of Cordelia's journey of adjusting to the planet's culture, of trying to make a new home in this place that's very alien to her. And then also various political things that happen where there's various uprising and rebellion and stuff. Now we come to my favorite book of the series, Memory. This is a book where after Miles has gallivanted across the galaxy for many stories now, going off and being a space mercenary, he's called home to Barrayar. And Memory, coming back to Barrayar, is another reason why I think you should read the Cordelia prequel books before you get to this one. Because these are the books that finally start dealing with like a lot of Barrayar and politics and history, and so having the prequels read before you get to Memory makes that transition a lot smoother. And while he's there, he suffers a very big defeat. He gets a huge setback that is pretty much the worst thing that could have happened to him. And then this book is a lot about him rebuilding his life and figuring out what really matters to him after this huge blow. It's also a book where one of his parental figures in his life has also suffered a very big blow, and he is trying to support and help them while also investigating how this all happened and kind of really coming forward in his role as an investigator, which we'll see more in future books. It's a masterpiece. I love it. It was the best book I read last year. It has my whole heart. It's beautiful. It's honestly the gem of the series. And everyone else agrees with me because it also has the highest rating of any book in the series. Next on the list is a book called Komarr. And this book takes place after Miles has transitioned a little bit away from his role as a mercenary. He's getting a little older in life, his priorities have shifted, and now he's become kind of an investigator for the government of Barrayar. He is sent to a nearby planet named Komarr to investigate some industrial accidents that happened there. So this book is about Miles adjusting to his new career path, and this book is also about his new love interest named 𝐂𝐇𝐏𝐿. She becomes one of our narrators in this book, and it's also about her adjusting to some new life decisions and career paths that she's making, and about their orbits intersecting as they both try to solve these problems and mysteries in their lives. Komarr is a very cute, very solid book, and it also signals kind of a change in the series of we're now transitioning to more kind of homey, romance-centered plots and a little bit away from fast-paced mercenary plots, but they're all still very good. Next we have A Civil Campaign. You might think that at the end of the last book, Komarr, that Miles and 𝐂𝐇𝐏𝐿 would have been together by the end of the book. They are not. They still have some ways to go, and some of that ways is traversed in a civil campaign. A civil campaign is interesting because we get a few more narrators. This is a book which has like 3-4 different romance plot lines all happening on Barrayar between the friend group of Miles and his family members and friends and everyone. And some of them end up in happy relationships by the end of the book. There's even a wedding at some point, and some of them do not end in happy relationships, and it's so entertaining. This book is like a comedy of manners now with all the characters you've grown to love over all these books, and it's like, I love it. I love it. And I never thought that starting out this series it would turn into a comedy of manners, but it did it so well. Even if you start this series expecting sci-fi battles, you might still really love this book because you've grown to care for the characters over all of these books you've already read. Then we're moving on to the novella Winterfair Gifts. This novella is pretty much just an epilogue to the events of a civil campaign. Next, you should read Captain Vorpatril's Alliance, because after finishing a civil campaign, you will be craving more Ivan. He's one of our narrators in a civil campaign, and though his arc does get a kind of ending in that book, you're gonna be craving for more. This book is where you get the more. This is the book where Ivan Vorpatril, one of my favorite characters of the series, gets his own light to shine. He's been a sidekick in some of these books, he's been a minor narrator in some of these books. Here is his own book, all of his own adventure, and it is a delight to read. Next, you should read Falling Free. Some people will tell you to start the series with this book because technically it is first in chronological order as it's a prequel about 200 years before the original series. I do not think you should start with this book. Of all the books in the series, this is the only one I didn't love. This is my least favorite by far. And if I had started with this book, I would have never discovered my favorite books through the series. So do not start with Falling Free. Yes, you may read it. Some people, in fact, even love this book. I'm not one of them. Like I said, this is a book that's pretty much a prequel to the series. The reason that you still have to read this is because it establishes really strongly this race-ish of people called the 𝐂𝐸𝐻𝐄𝐑𝐏𝐄𝐒. The 𝐂𝐂𝐸𝐻𝐄𝐑𝐏𝐄𝐒 are people that have arms instead of legs, and they're designed to live in like space station zero-G environments. So this book is kind of their origin story. So yeah, you should read this book. It does help you understand the next book. You could also skip it if you wanted to, but lots of people love it. You should read it eventually. This is a really good place to read it. Next on the reading order, you should read Diplomatic Immunity. This is combining the role back of Miles as an adventurer and Miles as a galactic explorer. Here, he's being sent to investigate a matter in 𝐂𝐸𝐻𝐄 space. And this is him solving that mystery and checking all of the interesting politics that come because of it. Next we have Flowers of Vashnoi. Now, one of the side characters in Diplomatic Immunity is 𝐂𝐇𝐏𝐿, the love interest from books ago. And she does quite a bunch of awesome things in Diplomatic Immunity, but it's all off screen. She doesn't get to be a narrator, and after reading Diplomatic Immunity, I'm just craving more 𝐂𝐂𝐇𝐏 content. This novella is to fix that craving. As I mentioned earlier, 𝐂𝐂𝐏𝐿 is very into plants, and in this novella she gets tasked with helping investigate some plants in a nuclear fallout zone and then some crazy interactions with the locals that happen because of this. And that's the novella. Have fun reading it, it's very cute. Next we have Cryoburn. This is another book where Miles is going off in the galaxy and being an investigator, and the planet that he's sent to investigate on this time is a planet that is obsessed with preserving people. So when someone's about to die, they cryo-freeze them. And then after decades and hundreds of years of this, they just have like thousands and thousands and maybe millions of people cryo-freezed, and it has completely ended up messing up their economy and political landscape. So Miles comes in investigating one thing, but then he slowly starts discovering other bigger plots, and of course because he's Miles, he sticks his nose in it and gets into big trouble, and there kicks off the plot. No matter what other order you read this series in, I definitely think Gentleman Jole and the Red Queen should be your final one, because it acts as such a nice epilogue to the series as a whole. This book is from the perspective of Cordelia. It takes place many decades after the other events of the series, and this is after her love and husband, 𝐂𝐿 Vorkosigan, has died of old age. So this is about Cordelia kind of readjusting to life alone, finding her own identity, and also maybe finding some new love. Also prominently in this book is Miles. Now also, you know, many decades after other things, he's moved on to different stages of his life, so you also get kind of his epilogue. And I feel like this book really helps tie the series together and puts a nice bow on it and lets you say, good night, you did so good, thank you. At least that's how I felt when I finished with this book and finished with the series. I felt like it was such a nice send-off to all of these books that I loved. because this series, it's solidified itself as one of my top series of all time. I found so many 5-star books in here. I found so many characters to love and plot lines to get so obsessed with, and like, I highly recommend it. Please do not be scared away from the series because of its terrible covers. Yes, I know most of the covers for the series are terrible, but I promise the contents are beautiful and so well written, and you will love them. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being along on this journey for the Vorkosigan Saga. Feel free to fight me in the comments about what you think the correct reading order should be.